You're watching Barnstable this morning. Joining me now is Felice Cohen. Felice, of course, is an author, and you grew up here on the Cape, right here in Barnstable. You live in Manhattan now?
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to have you here. We had you here earlier to talk about your first book, which was, I forget the title.
It's called What Papa Told Me.
That's right.
A memoir about my grandfather.
Yes. And now you have a second book coming out. This is very exciting. Is it out already?
It's out. It just came out.
Great. 90 Lessons for Living Large in 90 Square Feet. And we should talk first a little bit about your experiences, because you actually lived in a 90 square foot apartment in New York City.
Yeah.
And it sort of became a huge thing for you, because did you put up a YouTube video on the topic?
I had written about tips on how to be organized, and then I was in the New York Post, and a woman who makes videos all around the world of small people's apartments contacted me to make a video. So she came in one day for about an hour and a half, made this video. I didn't think anything of it, and then it just went viral.
Yeah, everyone sort of wondered, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you live in a 90 square foot apartment?
Well, you know, I grew up here in Barnstable and Cape Cod, and I grew up in a pretty big house, and I had a huge room with 2 walk-in closets, and my whole life I've always...
Talk about a change.
Yeah, I've always been organized. I mean, I lived in a dorm room. I shared a room, with a small room in college, but I was always organized, and everything has to be neat. And when you go small, like the island of Manhattan itself, everything has to go up. The buildings go up. So that's pretty much what I took with me, that I knew things had to go up. But before I moved in, I put 77 boxes of stuff into storage. And I really kind of had to pare down and say, what do I really need? And every year that I stayed in that apartment, I was there for 5 years, I would go back to storage and I would start whittling down, because you realize I haven't needed this. And
right.
By the time I moved out, I got rid of all the boxes of storage.
Don't they say, I think, when you're talking about, like, I talk a lot about basement clutter, because for some reason everything I don't really need goes down to the basement, and then it sits there. So really, if you haven't touched something, I think they say, if you haven't touched something in a year, you really don't need it.
Yeah, and you also think, what don't I need, but what could help somebody else? You know, in these times, we want to give, because, you know, we have so many clothes, we don't wear them. We have lamps and books and things are not being used. Things should be utilized and not just collect dust.
So after the video went viral, people actually started contacting you and actually asked you to help them organize. Did you do any of that work?
I did. So I had a lot. I'm also a professional organizer. I've been doing that for years. So I had new clients. I was organizing them. But people all around the world were emailing me, Australia and Germany and all over the United States, and wanting tips on how to declutter, tips on how to downsize. People praising my philosophy about living large in a small space, which is how I got the title for the book.
Because really, if you think about it, even if we're not living in 90 square feet, it's still tough. It's still tough to find that balance of making sure you have enough room, no matter what the space is. So this really isn't necessarily about just how to live in a small space. It's also sort of advice on life.
It is. So I call it living large in 90 square feet or more, because it's not just living in a small space, and it's not really a how-to guide. There are so many how-to guides, and I didn't want to write a how-to guide of how to fold your shirts and that, because, I mean, we know how to do that. It's getting motivated to do it, and so I call my book a kind of a want-to guide, wanting to motivate you, whatever size space you live in. You want to come home, you want to love your space, and it's not just about the space, but it's also, like you said, about how to live. You know, and my first book was about my grandfather's life in the Holocaust and how he survived and lived. And this book is kind of a sequel, how I lived large in that space.
Love it. So any tidbits that you have that you want to share with us that we might find in the book if we pick up a copy?
Sure. So there are tips for, well, I'll look through the comments because I can't even remember. But, you know, like I say, you know, maybe Peter Pan was onto something. Because it's, you know, kids have recess for a reason, because we need that recess, and we're so busy in our lives today that we're running around, we're working, we're going from job to job and errand and picking up kids or whatever we're doing. We don't really stop and play, and we need that release. We don't take lunches. We need to take lunches. Vacation days go unused, and it's important because this is not a dress rehearsal. You know, this is
This
it.
is it.
This is it. So you want to enjoy every day, and you don't want to come home also to piles of stuff. So there are tips for getting motivated. Have a friend come over. Or you have a, people see their garage, they get overwhelmed. I say, you know what, set a timer for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
When the timer goes off, stop. If you want to keep going, and generally people start to see the motivation.
Yeah.
They do.
That is so interesting because you're talking about living life to the fullest and making sure that we have enough time for ourselves. I think now with technology the way it is, and we're constantly checking our phones, I just read something the other day about how a majority of women are checking their work email before they even get out of bed.
Yeah.
So this is crazy times we're living in, and really important to find those tricks of the trade to get yourself motivated to do things, but also make sure you have time for yourself as well. Because if you don't have an organized space, you really can't function very well, can you?
Right. And I think that, the living small, I think, is taking off because people are wanting more experiences over more stuff. And when you're bogged down with stuff, you're cleaning stuff, you're organizing stuff, you're putting stuff away, you're washing stuff, you're doing all this stuff, and half the time you don't even use it. So you want to have more time to do what you want to do.
Yeah,
go for
less
a bike
time
ride.
taking care of stuff.
Right,
exactly. So you're actually going to be part of a tiny house. I mean, the tiny house movement is growing. So this is such an interesting topic right during this time. You're actually going to go to, is it a conference or what is it?
It's called the Tiny House Jamboree. It's going to be in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is the second year. Last year they had 40,000 people at it. So they have people who build these tiny homes, and it's the philosophy about really living smaller and living more economical and enjoying more out of life.
Yeah, so important. Where can we get a copy of 90 Lessons for Living Large in 90 Square Feet or More?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Perfect.
Anywhere. Yeah, it's a book and an ebook.
And then I have to mention too, you're on the Cape right now. You do live in Manhattan, but you're coming back this summer, and you're going to actually make a stop at the Hyannis Public Library.
Yeah, July 6th, part of their series with authors. I've been there a few times. They're great. And I love coming home. There's always a nice crowd, and my third grade teacher shows up. It's nice.
See, that's the best.
It really
I have to say, Barnstable is such a special place. We're glad that you get to return because we love having you here on the show.
I love coming here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, author Felice Cohen, of course, as the author of 90 Lessons for Living Large in 90 Square Feet or More. Thank you so much. Pick up your copy, Barnes & Noble, or, of course, Amazon. For Barnstable This Morning, I'm Sarah Mannel. Awesome.